Hello, and so good afternoon, everyone. I am Sarah Jane Manaday, and on behalf of Sarai Project 2.4, which is Insect Pest and Disease Advisory System, headed by our project leader, Director Melvin Ebenga, I would like to present to you our studies entitled Temporal Analysis of Crop Pest and Disease Dynamics through Simulation Modeling using Stella. And along with me in this project are colleagues from National Crop Protection Center, Institute of Weed Science, Entomology and Plant Pathology, and Institute of Computer Science of UP Los Baños in collaboration with partner SUCs and institutions of Project Sarai. So to start with, in the Philippines, crop losses caused by pests and diseases can reach as high as 100% under favorable condition and when there is no immediate intervention is done. These potential losses are frightening, especially for an agricultural country like ours, wherein millions of our people rely on agriculture as their primary source of income. While this threat is becoming more and more common, it is continually aggravated by changes in climate patterns, emerging pests, and introduction of transboundary pests and diseases, thereby imposing threat to our country's food security. These challenges could be averted or mitigated with early planning using proper decision-making tools. And in designing efficient crop protection management program, key components of integrated pest management strategy are essential. The three major components are prevention, monitoring, and intervention. Prevention is what we call the first line of defense, and it involves stopping the entry of pests and diseases to an area where it is not present. Monitoring, on the other hand, is done to assess damage and to determine appropriate intervention. And thirdly, intervention involves specific control measures such as cultural, chemical, biological, and use of resistant varieties. While monitoring allows us to assess pest situation and determine what sort of pests and diseases are present in the area, forecasting allows us to predict pest problems before they impose greater damage. Combination of these two allows us to understand dynamics of pests and diseases and estimate possible risk that may occur, and one of the methods to do this is through simulation modeling. Hence, the general objective of this study is to understand pest and disease dynamics using simulation modeling for pest and disease advisor system. Specifically, it aims to develop general framework models for major pests and diseases of Sarai focus crops using Stella. And in order to achieve those objectives, the principle of plant pest and disease modeling was adopted. And in reality, it is difficult to understand factors that may contribute to pest and disease occurrence when the key components such as pest, crop, and environmental factors are analyzed individually and separately. The principle behind modeling is to get the individual factors and transform it to a quantitative description of the interaction among environment, hosts, and pathogen variables. Specific model inputs that were utilized in the models were categorized based on the three major components of disease triangle. For the environmental factors, forecasts of daily minimum and maximum temperature, daily rainfall, and relative humidity were generated from MarkSim, DSAT weather file generator using MyRock as GCM models under RCP 4.5 scenario with at least 30 replicates. For the crop, we included growth rate, growth stage or age of plant, parts of plant infected, whether localized or systemic, and also senescence. For the insect pest, life cycle includes duration per stage, fecundity, mortality, and habitat carrying capacity. For the disease cycle, We included latent and infectious period, basic infection rate, and start of infection. So all these variables and parameters were put in the Stella and processed in the software to be able to simulate insect population at different stages and to simulate disease incidence. And in developing crop pest and disease models using Stella, the key epidemiological features of each pest and disease were used. System boundary was set and variables were identified either as state variable, control variable, or converting variable. State variables carry the knowledge of the system, and it is the basis of all the computations of other variables. And in this figure, you can see state variables are represented by squares. So here, the healthy, the latent, the infectious, and the post-infectious sites. These are the, and also the senescence. These are the state variables for the disease models. And for the insect models, it's the different stages of insect life cycle, such as egg, the instar, and up to the adult. And variables that directly change these state variables are what we call the control variables. And these are represented by the gray arrows here, as you can see. And these small circles are what we call the converting variables. And these are the sources of information, such as the weather data, egg rate, and birth rate. Okay, so these are the general framework models that were developed for Sarai focus crops. And as I have mentioned, these were based on life cycle of insects and infection cycle of pathogen in the crops as affected by weather factors. And these are sample simulations of different diseases using the general framework model for crop diseases. And for evaluation and analysis, models were run in daily time step depending on planting duration. And simulated disease incidence or severity, as you can see, followed the sigmoid curve, which is the general pattern observed in many disease epidemics. And start of this increase varied depending on the type of disease. For instance, in the rice blast model here, disease started to increase at around 30 days after crop establishment, which is common to rice blast since symptoms of blast pathogen usually start at the tillering stage. And for tomato leaf curl, on the other hand, disease rate can be very high as early as 40 days after crop establishment, assuming there is high population of vectors and there is no intervention or say no pesticides applied. The same results were observed in other disease models. Okay, so these are examples of forecasts for insect pests like Oriental armyworm and Asian corn borer over 150-day period. The egg, larval, and adult stages are indicated by purple, the blue and the red lines respectively. And the simulations show that up to 6 generations of both pests can occur during the cropping period. And the trend was determined by the influence of temperature on the maturation time of each insect life stage. And with these simulations, we can estimate when high populations may occur during a cropping period. So to conclude, simulation models can provide estimates of temporal dynamics of pests and diseases, and variations in the dynamics were brought by differences in the parameters and variables that affect pathogen. This information can be used as basis for intervention strategies that must be implemented. And some of the applications include providing early warning system and advisory for possible occurrence and outbreak. So that's all. Thank you all for listening.